Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we do the reverse podcast again. This time we've got the wonderful Eric Titterud, Norwegian by ancestry, now in sunny Southern California. Not sure it could be any more different, but you're an excellent hockey guy out there, coaching a ton. Glad to have you on.
Sure thing.
All right. Where should we start today?
Well, I'm sure that at least some of your audience are probably know this information already, but for those that don't, can you give us an idea of, how you got started in coaching and how that turned into a podcast?
Yes. Quick and dirty background. So my dad started in hockey when the Penguins came to town in Pittsburgh. So he started kind of like high schoolish area. Eventually went to Carnegie Mellon, graduated there, and got involved coaching in the Pittsburgh area. So I've been around this since I was born. I used to play around in the penalty box and scores table while he was doing practice as a kid, crawling around. And apparently I thought hitting the horn multiple times during practice was an absolute hoot. So through that, played hockey, graduated, got asked to come back to the college team I played for. And that's where I started down this coaching journey. It was one of those, like, I was going to take a few years off and then get involved. I always knew I wanted to be a coach. But the guy asked me and I couldn't say no because I'm like, I want to coach with this guy. So that worked out well. Matt Cook, had him on the podcast. He was episode 100 for those that want to go back and listen to that. And then I was coaching, kind of did a little bit of everything, and then was doing high school hockey at a private school. And I just found a lot of the conversations I wanted to have with that cohort and a lot of the private clients I was doing that were older, like they can handle concepts. I just couldn't find it out there, like resources that I wanted to use and the conversations that I was having and the topics. So I was like, all right, I got to create this myself. So I started creating it, and then COVID happened, and I was like, okay, well, can't really play or anything. So I started putting out all this information onto the internet and creating more like polished pieces rather than my back of the napkin kind of stuff. A lot of Word and Excel and nerdy things like that, link libraries, etc. So that started the newsletter, and I did the podcast at the same time. And just want to have good conversations talking about stuff you just don't really get anywhere. It's like nerdy, but very actionable to helping our players. Like the biggest compliment I ever get is like, I shared this podcast episode, I shared this newsletter to my player or players, and they started playing better. Like, oh, greatest thing ever.
Have you found that there's like a certain type of hockey person that tends to be more in tune with, podcast listening, as opposed to like perhaps some of the old timer type coaches that are set in their ways, that sort of thing?
I find a lot of people are attracted to the Hockey IQ universe that maybe are disappointed in their current situation, and want a little bit better, or they want a little bit more. Like their coach keeps talking about, we got to work hard, we got to activate. And it's great, but there's a lot of specificity and details that go into these things. Like, what does working hard actually look like? And maybe working hard is actually trying too hard, where now we're running around and we're going to terrible spots. So actually working hard is not adding to performance. Obviously, a lot of what I'm trying to do is just add to performance. I don't care how it's done. Play fast, play slow, left, sideways, diagonal, up, down. It doesn't matter to me. I want to see an improvement in performance that leads to results. I like winning as much as the next person. The best way to do it is through development.
Yeah. So you feel like you're fulfilling a need that perhaps some local organizations or whatever type of situation that particular players find themselves in is just not being fulfilled. Do you think there's like a reason for that at at the average, just rank out there that gets drawn to the more, specific, science oriented, just study oriented approach?
It just comes back to time, right? Like how much time do you have in a team environment? This is more of like it can be a team environment, but a lot of it's like personalized or like you're giving out as homework because you can't have this conversation with every single player, or
Yeah.
it's really hard to have it as a group. So now we can give homework, or you're following up on this, and now we can have a quick 2 minute conversation rather than a whole 20 minutes. So it's a time leverage thing for everyone involved, whether it be the players, the parents. Like parent doesn't want to stick around the rink for an extra hour as we're doing chalk talk. Like go home, we got dinner and homework to do. We've got, put the kids to bed, it's bath time, whatever it may be. So a lot of time for leverage and it's just hard stuff to get to. And you can have these conversations, but it also takes, a certain relationship you've got to develop. There's a lot of those details that go into going deeper rather than maybe broader and more vague, less specific and detail oriented. Obviously, there's great people out there doing it, but I mean, time and effort drives everything, right? Like, why do we buy anything in life?
Yeah.
Saves one of those.
So now, just out of curiosity, have you used homework yourself as a tool with your teams? Like
Uh,
actually assigned homework and had them turn in things and
Less turning in things and more of, okay, I'm going to choose someone at random, could be any of you, and you got to go up into the board and explain back what we're doing. Or it could even just be a team system. So it may not be anything with the newsletter or podcast. It'll just be a team system. Like, here's how we're going to run the breakout. Here you
yeah.
go, freshman. Here you go, 14-year-old, in front of your entire peers and coaching staff. Recreate what we're doing and explain it.
Is this a pop quiz or you give them warning?
Oh, I do not give the person warning. They all know it's coming. They know someone is going to be doing it. They don't know which one. So it
Yeah.
encourages them to actually do it. You can take chances. You can take your chance if you want. But I find it super involved. And then you get people like razzing each other, and it just shows like an environment of acceptance. Like, okay, you may not know it. I'm not going to hate on you. Obviously, we're going to give you a little like, come on, man, like get your stuff together. Like everyone else knows what's going on here. Just kind of keeps a little camaraderie, a little bit of, okay, I got to know my stuff because I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. Peer pressure as a tool, right?
A
So
positive peer pressure. It does
yeah.
exist.
So because I come from academia, and one of the faux pas that virtually everyone breaks at some point is assigning their own book as reading. So you've never been tempted to just like say, okay, you got to read the newsletter for you know the
I
whole
haven't done it
season.
on a team wide. I've done it for individual players where it's, I mean, again, it was time leverage for me in the original. It's just like, I want to have this conversation, but I don't want to have it 7 times over for 20 minutes. So I'll send it out to a specific person for a specific reason, and then we'll come back. But from a just bland team, I've gone through it in film of like why point shots suck, like walk through the thought process, but no team wide, more individual for
Yeah.
their specific what is most probably resonant for them.
Are there other like third party or external resources that you found uh more valuable than others for like referring kids to? Like for example, sending them to one YouTube channel I've enjoyed a lot is I think it's Hempfield or Hempfield hockey development, I think they call it. And they do a bunch of like coaches clips about certain topics, and they're pretty good at explaining them. They're a little, technologically and video quality stuff like that a little out of date, but the ideas are explained very well. Is there anything like that that you tend to use more often than not, or assign to your kids, or just show them as?
I find it hilarious that you're referencing that because I remember putting that gentleman's information out there and being like, I think this is absolutely fantastic. Like, this is awesome, awesome stuff. Like, maybe not the most prominent thing you'd think of, but I'm like, there's good stuff all over the board. So I'm a collector of many things. There's no, I love this and everything about it. That would probably be the one where I agree with you. Um, where it's
Well,
good, but
I
I'm not sure
think
he's
that.
with Hempfield anymore. I think he may have retired.
Oh, right, yeah.
I
Well,
got I got to follow up with him. It's been too long.
it's interesting because I think the other video is set to 4 kids, and that prevents it from being shared directly. Like you have to share the playlist, I think, and there's some
Yeah,
other
or
tech.
like the links specifically. You can't like share it directly. You have to do like copy and paste of the URL. You can't like do it from the page, yeah, or from the
Yeah,
video.
but it just goes to show you like the the availability of those sorts of resources. You really have to be in tune with how the various social media operates and actually develop that skill separately in order to sort of succeed. Is that something like what are some lessons you've learned about just in terms? I mean, obviously you're just making the podcast and you're doing the newsletter. Are there other avenues that you like have gotten into that you found to be beneficial for kind of getting your thoughts out there, or are there things that like you want to do but that you've been either time or just knowledge or whatever it may be has held you back?
If anyone listening is really good with making YouTube videos, I'm all ears on that. Like I know I can talk into a camera and that'd be fine, but basically like recreate the newsletter in video form, like that would be super cool. I love the one that's I hate blanking on people's names. But anyways, Mr. St. Louis doing a piece on St. Louis. Why am I forgetting? I will remember this. But anyways, it's really cool. He took a Marty St. Louis Hockey IQ podcast and turned it into a whole on video, and it was like clips of Martin St. Louis actually pulling off a lot of the things. And I thought it was unbelievable. It was like talking about like how do I perceive the game? David St. Louis. So David put it out about Martin. It was just unbelievable. So I love that. So anyone wants to do that, I would love to go down that avenue. I still just in general, I feel like I'm a terrible marketer. Like I know my lane with like Twitter and all of that, but like getting out maybe a thread or putting it into good spots. I just try to create the best content I would want as a coach, and hopefully that resonates with other people who are trying to do similar things that I'm going for. But yeah, my tech stack is terrible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, your kid may eventually be able to help you there, right? Have you thought about training him into the business, or more a little joking there, but more seriously, have you thought about how you're going to approach raising a hockey kid of your own? Is there any master plan out there that you're going to go by, or are you just going to wing it?
Solid developmental principles of allowing the child to choose their own pathway in life.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do maybe need a little kick to help with their passions and direct it properly, but for the most part, they drive the bus of what do I want? What do I want to get out of this? I was always a person who did not really want to make a career out of hockey. Like I saw enough kids older than me and how like kind of miserable it can sometimes be. So I was like, I just want to continue to play the game long into life, enjoy the sport in general. So that was my goal. So, I was never a kid you would see like huge in the gym, like trying to like, oh, make the most of it and play at the highest level possible. That was never a goal that I had. I just wanted to enjoy playing and having a good time through it. And then coaching, it's more so of giving back, helping create beautiful taxpayers rather than leeches on society. So if I'm creating decent enough taxpayers that go out into the world and spread joy and pay into the system, I'm happy.
Okay. So as far as over the you know how many episodes is it now for the podcast?
I believe this one's going to be 135 or 136.
Okay, yeah, so that's quite a few. Is there like one or two or three that really stick out in your head as just like this was the best interview, or this was where I learned the most, that I actually applied my own practices like right away, or maybe like a sleeper idea that you heard and you didn't quite click with it until later down the line?
I mean, Martin St. Louis, like just getting in the mind of an absolute genius. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. That was unbelievable. Everyone can attest to it. Like, it could be maybe the best podcast I've ever listened to, and I was part of it, which is blows my mind. I love that. I did some spitballing with a good friend of mine, Michael Toplitsky. He's a high school coach here in Ohio. Really good friend of mine. He was in my wedding. Like awesome guy. Like if you're around like the high school ish level, maybe not like high end performance like Minnesota, but a little bit less than that, I think it'd be super applicable and really fun and cool. If we're looking for maybe more skill development stuff, Brian Slagaki's awesome. Yeah, I probably talk to him 2 or 3 times a week, just throwing stuff back and forth at each other. He's awesome. And something we've been talking a ton about recently is just the idea of like, how do we teach technical stuff through athletic feel? Like he's a big CLA kind of games guy. And I'm trying to expand his horizons and he's trying to expand my horizons. And we're both kind of nibbling at the idea of like, how do you don't want to say like put your arm here, open your shoulder first, and then boom. Like it's really hard to think about that. But getting those guardrails of helping players self-coach and correct, like the Inner Game of Tennis is a fantastic book.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a piece out on this actually this month. Just as I'm nibbling away at it, I think that one's absolutely fantastic. An early episode that I think was really, really good was the one with Mitchell Brown of EP Ringside. Super fascinating guy. Like he truly thinks the game. You're getting it from like a scout. Like how do you project things to the next level? Talked about transferable skills. And then if anyone's into skating, like Joe Plandowski, I learned so much about skate. Like I have a general idea because I've studied it for quite a bit and I've talked to a lot of skating coaches. But she's just, I feel like on a next level sometimes. Like everything's super applicable to ice hockey. Like her kids all played junior hockey. I know at least one was drafted into the NHL. Like her husband's won a Stanley Cup as a head scout, so they know a thing or two about hockey and skating and transferring it to the next level. Super super cool. Loved that kind of stuff. And from just like a youth coach, Adam, I'm gonna mispronounce his name. It's like Jewiski, Jezewski. Just I think it was Squirt when I talked to him. And just how does he taking some of these ideas and maybe they're not ready for the super high level concept type stuff, but boiling it down for squirts and peewees in that age group where it's majority of the kids. Like not every kid's in AAA. How do you just have a great experience and help the kids improve and get that self confidence um, from those types of levels? And I thought that was really, really fascinating conversation. So I would say those are the ones that stick out to me. If you're really getting nerdy and trying to go deep, Thomas Pacina is another great one. And then yeah, I go all day talking about this.
Yeah.
Adam Nicholas is great. Wade Russell's fantastic. You know, uh, Keegan McMindus. I learned that day that I did not want to get into skating and the level of details of that go around into what's a good cut, all like the details of skating. So I take my skates to him, but I don't need to know how the sausage is made. Just please make the sausage for me.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah. That's pretty specialized knowledge. I'm obviously it's great if you can just know everything about, that slightly connects to your field, but but you got to set limits somewhere.
Yeah, I
Um,
drew a line that day. I'm like, all right, he expert. Thank you.
okay, so I want to transition into talking a little bit more about coaching and sort of your principles and methods. What do you so if you're just to kind of start from a high level view of things, like what do you see as like the top, three, or you can do whatever number you want, but skills that are important for a coach to have, let's say at, you know, a youth level of your choice, either squirt or bantam or, high school, something like that.
The actual skills of coaching. Wow, this is a great question. First one, just create a great environment. Like, what does a kid think about 10 years down the road about you as a coach? Like, they will maybe remember a drill you did a gazillion times over, but more so they'll remember like how you made them feel, what kind of environment they were living into. So one that is not just physically safe, but also psychologically safe, I find to be absolutely massive. Did they have fun? Did the parents feel connected to everyone? Like everyone wants that sense of community. So like just creating that kind of environment that you would want to be in, you'd want your kids to be in, everything, you're having fun, they're having fun. Like that's why we all do this, right? Community and fun. Like take those two pieces. That's pretty much that's first piece. The second one is like actually, how do you teach? Can you teach well? Like that's ultimately what this is. It's an athletic teaching. So how do we go about that? I think that's absolutely massive. So that, being able to actually go through the process, not yelling, not telling, asking questions, getting them thinking, good teaching environment. And I find the one that most, actually, probably the two things that really annoy me here. People don't get specific enough when they just say like work hard, like, okay, we want F2 middle driver to the net. That would be good. Be specific. And then two, the checking for understanding. So many times do I hear any questions make sense? We have no idea if the kid knows or not. Rather than maybe, as you would know, as an education, choose on something. All right, repeat that back. Or, okay, we're on our breakout center. You need to do two things to help the breakout and support well. What are they? Oh, I got to be low and I got to be slow, coach. Brilliance. Boom. So that those would be massive. And then the last one would just be a lifelong learner. Like encourage the kids to also constantly be learning and growing and having that mindset. That is massive. And then the ultimate thing, part of all of this, uh, quit the sarcasm. Like I don't know how sarcasm helps, and I think it hurts a lot. I think that's one of the most destructive things coaches do is they get ridiculously sarcastic or it's constant sarcasm. Now players know what's real, what's not real. Is he praising me? Is he making fun of me? And it's like playing mind games with the player. So I would cut that out. So sorry to add that one at the end, but the other three I think would be super valuable for coaches.
Yeah. Well, and I've been a writing teacher for almost 2 decades now or whatever, and I have to say the be specific element is common across all sort of teaching disciplines, whether it be coaching or others, because there are too many instances in which, I mean, just as an example, if you tell a student, I need you to be more specific, a lot of times they don't know actually how to do that. And you've got to provide them with examples. You've got to provide them with a more deep explanation about, how to make an argument more articulate, for example, choosing the right words, using the right terminology, things like that. So it's certainly principles that carry across.
Yeah,
Now I'm curious.
they don't know where to focus. Like
Yeah,
a lot of times people talk about, oh, you need a shoulder check. A player shoulder checks, they look at the entire picture and they took nothing away from it.
yeah,
We're shoulder checking to look for your example, strong side winger. We're shoulder checking to see what the strong side defenseman is doing. Is he pinching or not? Just start with that.
yeah. Well, and I think when you have students that, or sorry, athletes that have the multi-sport athlete sort of background, there are other sports that are a little bit better at hockey, I think, in identifying sort of option like read routes where you're keying off of certain behaviors from the other team and choosing your path based on that. So having a bit more of that at the, I'm sure they do some of that, higher levels that I haven't had experience at, but certainly at the younger levels, I think would help a lot, because it's in doing so, you're saying, okay, look at, their position with respect to the blue line. Like, are they too far ahead, too far, these sorts of little details, and then making decisions based on that, would be very helpful for the average youth athlete. So,
Absolutely.
but the first thing that you mentioned, the sort of community and fun aspect, and I know from listening to the podcast that you place a lot of emphasis on the long-term viewpoint perspective rather than short-term, for certainly winning the game this weekend as opposed to developing a stronger player long-term. But parents, particularly in the States, have a tendency to be a little short-term oriented sometimes, particularly the sort of highly competitive ones that are constantly looking at other programs, constantly, sort of questioning, oh, is my son or daughter getting the best, is like, are they having too much fun because they're convinced that learning is supposed to look like a bunch of kids doing a drill. So how do you, when you're talking to parents or when you're talking to the kids as well, how do you sort of manage those expectations or that sort of conflict in culture between the short term and the long term? Like, is there an approach that you use that you found to be successful with getting parents on board?
I mean, start with why. Why are you doing this? Like, what are you trying to get out of this? Why did you even start? I was trying to get my kid athletically inclined and set up for a good physical behavior. Okay, are we accomplishing that? Yay or nay? What are we trying to do here? I always try to find that as the question anytime I'm trying to do anything. Like, what are we doing here and why are we doing it? And if you dig deep enough beyond the first why, it's to win, like just keep going. I forget who says it, but like ask why 5 times. You come down to it. You want a healthy child. You want a physically capable child. You want them to have enjoyment out of their life in whatever they're doing. So ultimately for me, I'm trying to develop that in the best way possible. Obviously there's people who are a little more short-sighted or like my personal favorite as they go through puberty, it's the old like crabs in a bucket or like burning down your neighbor's house. Like no, neither of those are great. Like on the surface, like, oh yeah, F that guy, then I'm gonna get more ice time. Well, it's actually better if you help build them up, which makes you stronger. It's the old iron sharpens iron. The crab in the bucket's always grabbing the guy and no one gets out. Or the burning the neighbor's house doesn't make yours look any better. So like, what are we actually trying to do? How are we trying to accomplish that? And that's my ever ongoing battle with new freshmen and sophomores and young people. It's just like understanding like what is leadership look like, what does development look like for you, and then making sure the parents kind of get an idea of like what are we trying to do. So like I think weekly emails are super effective, or even monthly at least. Like here's our philosophy, here's what we're doing. 'Cause parents just want to be communicated with. Like they want to know what's going on. They want to feel connected. So finding ways to do that super, super impactful. And some people aren't going to get that, and some people aren't going to believe in you, and that's okay. You got to be okay with the fact that you're not going to be everyone's favorite person. If you stand for something, you're not standing for something else, which may or not be someone's cup of tea. Trying to be everything to everyone, that's just recipe for disaster on many fronts.
Yeah. Do you think so? Just along these lines, USA Hockey made the switch to cross ice for mites, and it was unpopular at first, but I feel like a lot of people, at least, have bought into it, and I certainly have. I've seen a lot of benefits. Do you think that? And I have seen that Sweden is doing some much more aggressive things with that in terms of changing the sizes for in a number of different ways for different age groups. Though I'm not sure how widespread that change is yet. But do you think that like other modifications, like for example, half ice for squirts, do you think that's something that we should be trying to push, trying to look into, or do you think that that's just going to create too much of a culture backlash with the parents and expectations?
I don't understand why full ice would be good for mites. Like, I mean, just and this goes even to like small area games. Small area games are great for development, but they're not always great for everyone for development. Like the
Yeah,
strongest players get the most out of smaller games because they're able to try more stuff. And when you're doing full ice, it definitely gears itself towards stronger skaters, which especially at that age, like some kids figured out and boom, they're off to the races and everyone else never touches the puck. Cross ice obviously is a lot more like there's a ton of benefits. Obviously, Sweden's gone down almost like they call it a six, but really it's like at the eighth of the sheet where they're playing these might games 3-on-3, and they're playing 3-on-3 games all the way up until like U13, U12. I think the
yeah,
advanced U12s are the ones that make the transition, or elite U13s. I say elite very very vaguely and weakly. The ones that are just, more passionate, they want to play it. They just clearly spend more time. They've had the ability to master some skills much better. And I think one thing that gets overlooked is something that Finland did, which is they kind of separated out. Like you can just have like the fun tract and you can have like the more serious tract. And you're able to jump between those pretty freely for the most part. Um, that's a great thing that we could potentially have in the States. I know like in Columbus here, we've got house league and travel. So you can kind of do
yeah.
both, which is cool. And I think we need to get more at that because some kids want to take it serious and others don't. And some figured out they want to take it serious early and some want to take it serious later. And, it's amazing for me in high school. Like you can tell which kids decided they wanted to be hockey players. It is a massive difference. So I don't know, just kind of having the different catering to what's right for what age group and that person. And when you're talking about the youngest of ages, like I always love the video of USA Hockey like sizing up the rink comparable for adults.
Yeah.
So they size the nets up, and they're like soccer nets, like goalie can't stop a thing. And if you watch Mites hockey, like I don't think I've ever seen a chance that isn't like A plus. Like it's right in the slot. Someone's got a great shot, or it's like right next to the net or back toward tap in. Like it's unbelievable. I feel terrible for the goalies of that age. Like you don't need full ice for that to occur. You just want to get the reps up as fast as possible. You want the kids feeling involved. And that's the biggest thing is like, do they feel involved in part of the game? Or are they switching off because like, I'm never going to touch the puck. It's way over there.
Yeah.
Many more issues over there, as we all can tell.
So, um, switching gears a little bit, so one of the things that I I've heard you talk about in podcasts, you mentioned it briefly here, where learning is highly dependent on successfully directing the attention of the learner to the specific details or information that you want, the signal, and separating that signal from the noise, right? Are there specific methods that you use in your practices that help you achieve that more effectively than others, or that like recommendations that you might have for just sort of directing the attention of athletes specifically where you want it? um, because a lot of times one thing I've found, particularly when I work with younger ages, is that a hockey rink is an awfully loud place. There's a lot of stuff going on. You're obviously battling their own attention, which uh, at least in sort of uh, folklore is sort of getting shorter with technology. They grow up with iPads, so in theory they're a little bit less uh, efficient at paying attention to people that are talking to them. So are there things that you do in practice that can direct that attention successfully, that hold the attention successfully? Are there things that you found be more or less effective?
Very age specific, right? Because what's developmentally appropriate for younger versus older. Younger ages just keep them moving, keep them competing. That's the biggest thing. As you get older, you can add details, and add just one specific detail and then build off it. And are they ready for the next thing? Yeah or nay? I'm doing high school kids, so I'm talking about roles of all the other people of everyone on the ice. Rushes. F1. What's your job? As a puck carrier. F2. What's your job? F3. What's your job? Or like how do we want to think about potentially attacking? Because so much hockey is just one on one until someone finally breaks through on like the 10% or less that actually work. It's quite boring and terrible hockey. Like it drives me insane. But you finally get the one or two. Basically, you need pairs. You get two players like I want to play with this guy, and they figure out like, oh, how do we work together and just dismantle, by creating small 2-on-1. So there's a lot of details on that. I mean, directing focus is huge, as you know, as an educator. So for me, like skating development, I'm always talking about details within like how does it feel? You should feel like this is happening. Like I love for kids. I mean, you could do this all the way down to probably like really good squirt players up. Skate on one leg all the way around. They quickly learn that pushing against air is not an effective strategy. Like you have to bend at the ankle. I think bending at the knee is something we can all just throw out of our vernacular. If you bend at your ankle, I guarantee your knee's bending. Bend at your ankles, and you got to push. You've got to push into the ice. There's only one force surface. You're only one surface that's going to give you the force to propel you where you need to go. So I'm talking about that kind of stuff. Like for example, this past week, I was talking about weight distribution through the turns. Like I got a lot of players, they'll be on their outside leg and they're just gliding, and it's a super long curve. You just can't get enough torque on it. So the agility is awful. So we're just going through corners. I'm like, all right, I want you to feel based on only like skate and then glide across the top of the circle, bottom of the other circle, and do that around. So they're going through the tops and bottoms, like the old Russian circles. And I'm like, outside leg only. Okay, next time, inside leg only. Okay, do it like you kind of normally do. And remember which leg you are dominant on and what percentage you are on that leg. After that, okay, where are we? Got it. Now I want you to add one crossover to these turns and just getting in that feeling of like, what does my body feel like at these specific moments? In the turn, where is my weight distribution? And the kid was like, so I'm asking the question, like, so where is your weight when you go around? And majority of the kids, it's probably 75 inside leg, which is correct. And you have 25 though that are on outside legs going around the corner. Well, they got no pop. It's going to be long, and now they have to move in order to move in their agility. So I'm like, okay, I want you now to try to get on your inside leg through this turn. Unbelievable the difference. Or the other thing I love to do is talk about skating. I want you to feel like your upper body's stacked on your lower body. I'm not talking about I want this foot here, that leg there, your shoulders, all that positioning, your head, yada yada. It's all about how does it feel, and that's what actually makes the change and the change that sticks in the athletic field. So for me, when I talk skating and skating development, I feel like, other than like one-on-one where you're doing video breakdowns with players, I can teach skating as good as anyone out there in a team environment. I'm not doing lines, I'm doing ovals, I'm doing turns, I'm doing these elements where it's a lot of feeling or it's force based on competition. Where you one-on-one keep away. Keep away is like the greatest thing ever for hockey players. Like every coach should be using that in any shape and form in any practice. Like there's so many elements. Like you need to eventually get to a point where your players are like, oh yeah, the guy right in front of me that's defending me, afterthought. I'm thinking about how do I beat their triangle? How do I find the next play? And until you develop that, it's really hard to develop a lot of small area playmaking. Um, Fortunately, my group just got there a little late. It took a whole season, but we're finally there, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. But so that would be my thoughts on that long-winded answer. But I'm huge into athletic feel and how do we take the concept of athletic feel and actually implement it logistically into our practices?
I don't know if you've ever, I don't think you've, uh, from the podcast, have you interviewed Nick Winkelman?
I
Or,
know of him. I've not
yeah,
had him on the podcast. I've thought about reaching out. I haven't done so. But if anyone knows Nick and wants to throw him, tell him to reach out to me.
I'm pretty sure you could get to him through USA Hockey, like Ken Martell in particular, brought him on for the webisode that they did during the COVID, those
Okay.
web what do they call them, seminars
Yeah,
or
just the
something like that.
webinar series. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, he has this book, Language of Coaching, and they talk about using an external focus. So instead of thinking about knees bending, you would think about driving your knee through the air, or like a ship would drive through water, like the prow of a ship, sort of splits the water in front of it. So using analogies and metaphors that actually create a picture in the mind of the athlete so that you can communicate feel through that imagery, it being more effective than highly technical language or vague language like bend at the knees, when really what you mean is to get an effective shin angle and other things like that. So
Yeah, I like his stuff. I just like to take it the extra step of
yeah,
the internal feel. Like you have to have an internal feeling of what is right or what is wrong. So it kind of gives like the guardrails so you can become your own coach. From a setting of goals and objectives of what you want to accomplish, that's where I love to go in his mind of like the external. So rather
yeah,
than saying you need to be explosive, I want to see the foot here and then you're pushing off where you've got good load. Because everything comes back to can you take the posterior chain and move it where you want it to go? Do you have that ability to have efficacy? So I like his ideas. They're great. Everyone should know them. I just love to take it an extra step where it's an internal feel with an external focus, which
yeah.
I know is super high level and super nerdy for most people, and they can't even follow it because it takes a lot of background knowledge and thought to even get there. But I feel when people get there, it is super effective because they're now understanding, well, how do I best cue and drive focus both with objectives and how does my body work within finding those objectives?
So do you have like a general opinion on some of the technological approaches that are used in training? So for example, um, an iPad on the ice for instant video feedback, but also, you know, anything up to using the like Intelligim, or I don't want to step on any sponsors. I don't know if that's a sponsor or not, but
Yeah, we can name anyone out here. This is an
yeah.
independent podcast. We're good.
Okay. Or Sense Arena. Obviously, the dream would be if you had a VR experience that could provide you a really close analog to training on ice, simply because ice is expensive and time limited for a lot of players. Certainly in SoCal it is. I mean, obviously it's easier up north than it is down here. But just I have some friends at coaches at the rink that are just anti. They don't want to see any technology anywhere near their practice, whereas others are, any new tool, they're just going to throw it out there for the sake of it. Where do you fall in that range? Or are there any that you like, or that you see other people using that you're pretty dubious about the benefits?
I go back to, why are we doing this, man? What are we trying to get out of it? Yeah, I think everyone's got their own constraints based on what their situation is. Like VR is a great thing. Everyone there's the knowledge of the game, and it's a lot of what you see and talk about as coaches or see online or whatnot. Like, it's great, but then you've got to implement it into the game. So I think that's where a lot of these neuroplasticity stuff is good. Like Intelligem is great. I think, obviously, it's been hard until recently to get good quality VR stuff. Obviously, Sense Arena I've had on as a sponsor here a little bit. Hockey IQ for $50 off. Thanks for the plug. So like, there's a lot of good stuff, and one of my good buddies owns Rapid Shot. Good Cleveland, Ohio guy. That's a great tool. They've got what they call rapid hands, even like you've got the screen above you and then your stick handling below. So like, that's cool. There's a lot of good resources that can help. You don't have to have super complex stuff. It's obviously great to have it. JC Campagna, who's been on here, plays professional hockey. Like, he trained by literally taking like $1 pair of sunglasses, taped on some cardboard so he couldn't see down, and that's how he worked on a stick handling. Same thing you could do. Just, literally close your eyes and stick handle ball. So there's a million ways to get it. What are you trying to get out of it? And, it's not so much about the hours of practice, but the practice, or not the, whatever the saying is. Basically, we want to be intentional and actually use the time where we're actually focused. And sometimes it's just needs to be quick and done. 5 minutes of VR training, we're out. Or 5 minutes of stick handling while watching a TV during the nightly news. So I do like technology. I mean, everything. So I think Steve Jobs said it's like the computer's the bicycle for the mind. Like, basically just leverages you to do so much. The American condor is the world's most efficient mover. Humans are like halfway down the list when it comes to like all animals in the world. The American condor is number one, like most efficient in movement and ability to get around. Um, Someone at Scientific American decided to put a human on a bike. They out they just smashed it. Like, they were even better than the Condor. Like, they were so far off, it was ridiculous. So that, and like the computer's kind of the technology. So you're thinking about like the bicycle was for movement from a in a capacity like where I'm at, where it's coaching, like the ability for the mind and being able to capture and retain information and be able to utilize that. Technology is that piece. How do we use it to our advantage? How do we make sure we're getting the most out of it? Why are we using it? When are we using it? What does it make sense for a specific situation? So I like all of it. I used to have a iPad that I use during practice. I still do from time to time, really not a ton, just based on my current situation of where I'm at. But I love having an iPod. Like, most kids have no idea what they're doing out there, or where, like, there's a lack of spatial awareness. Like, oh yeah, I was guarding no one on the half wall while the other team had the puck. You can tell them till you're blue in the face. The first time they see it on video, it's like, oh, okay. Because eventually you are what you put on tape. Like, that's my favorite part about players that think maybe more highly of themselves than what they are. Eventually you are what you put on tape. I think Deion Sanders actually talks about it. Like, what you put on tape is what you are. So it is what it is. I remember the first time I saw myself on tape, and I'm like, I am so awful. Like, I am terrible. And just not even needing coaching, just seeing like the coach had the ability to record a game all the way back in 2010 or whatever it was. Like, just being able to see my own game and be like, what am I doing? Massive game changer. So I would just recommend everyone watch themselves play hockey a little bit, even just a little bit, and it'll be a very, very helpful thing to do. So, more tech good. use it sparingly when it makes sense and based on your constraints and group. And, some kids will want to get super nerdy and talk about the stuff all day. Other kids just want their 2 cents and out. Everyone's different. And then this is true for the NHL. Obviously, there's some more nerds in the NHL than most, but still, like I know many NHL players and prospects, like they don't do any film outside of the team stuff, and that works for them. They got to keep their mind fresh. So very personalized. So I'm gonna just give a giant asterisk on that. But tech is where it's going. I mean, having the ability to just even like have a coach in or a player in Europe and you're somewhere else and the time lag, there's so many benefits to the tech. It's coming for us, it's come for everyone's job. It makes everyone better. I'm not saying come for your job as in like eliminate you, which it may, who knows. But if you lean into it, it will make you better.
Yeah, the let's say just 10 to 20 years from now, when once they have the AI robot coaches out there that have replaced us all, where do you see the game like going? Like, what do you think? Obviously, from when I was growing up in the dead puck era, where everybody was, there are a lot of things that just don't fly anymore. You've got to have the skill and the speed to survive nowadays. Do you see that accelerating in the future? Or are there other things that you think might be I don't know, more prevalent in the sort of the whether it be NHL level or college or whatever level you want to address, but is there a direction that you see the game going in the future?
Everyone being able to play every position. Like I hate practices where you have set lines, you can't play with anyone else. You always got to be with them, or you're tied to someone at the hip. It's great and it builds some chemistry, but at the end of the day, you've got to be able to play with everyone. Injuries are inevitable, illness is inevitable. And just having the ability and be flexible and play anywhere with anyone is extremely like you've seen it in football where yeah, they've gone more specialist in a lot of stuff, but still the guy who can do multiple things is extremely valuable. Um, and while hockey is specialized, once play gets going, there's a lot of elements that are not specialized compared to many sports. So having that ability to do many things well will never go out of style. And I would imagine more would do that. I just talked about the coffee game and on the Hockey IQ newsletter, and just the coach sitting back, and I had someone, and I've done this in the past, but I never like named it as the game. Like they called it the flip flop game. Six forwards go back, six defensemen go up, and they just flop positions for a full game. Um, there's so many appreciations. I've had so many kids going kicking and screaming, going one direction or the other, and then after they do, get over themselves and they get comfortable there a little bit, and then they go back to the normal stuff, and they're like, "Oh my God, it was so helpful for me to see this, experience that, whatever it may be." So I would just say the ability to do kind of a little bit of everything. Obviously, you need some elements that make you a little bit special, but just being able to be part of it. Obviously, hockey's going more and more positionalist, as I'll say in air quotations. So I'd say the game's going there, and obviously everything's be there's no going to be more like non-player coaches, and if you're not a player's coach, who are you coaching? So we're going that direction continuously.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I found again when I'm working with the younger players is that the they there's usually a subset of the team that doesn't like the idea of there being more habits or general principles as opposed to a specific role with specific rules attached to it. And a lot of the parents will fight back on that as well. Do you find that like the younger players that you've coached or the guys you're coaching now, are they more excited about positionless or are they afraid of it or what's their attitude towards that?
Um, it kind of depends. So I'm obviously getting them later in their development, but I've seen kind of where they've come from and the different environments they're coming out of and what they're comfortable with. Some coaches very much, you do this, you do that, do it well, done. They really seem to struggle compared to the ones that maybe had less given to them. And the thing that I keep coming back to, and maybe it's just me becoming an old man, is parents do a lot for their kids. and it's admirable. You want them to have a better life. You want them to have better this, better than you had, whatever it may be. It's always from great intentions. But we do so much for them where we take a lot of the autonomy. Like they don't know how to do things for themselves, or they've never been given the opportunity to do that. Like I know a lot of people who are my parents' age and much older, like when they were like 12, someone told them like, you're on your own. You've got to make your own decisions. Like plenty of them. I heard that story a gazillion times from that generation. You know, usually coming off the World War II vets, like you get it. Um, you don't see that so much. You know, like you're a bad parent if you're not like dropping your kid off at school. It feels like sometimes. Like, again, maybe I'm just becoming an old man, but I see a lot of kids struggling, and you know, there's obviously that journey into adulthood and figuring out. But I see from my first decade into my second decade, even just a difference there between what kids are willing to just go and take and be assertive with versus now it's almost like you have to give them the permission to do everything because they've been told what to do their entire life and now they've just got to go and do things. So for me it's always a struggle of like letting them self-organize, you know, have practice where I'm going to give them the instructions and there may be a question mark I haven't answered or maybe I didn't explain well enough, but I'm going to let this play out. I'm going to let them figure it out. Let them complain like you need to do this, you need to do that. And like some kids get it right away and some kids don't. But allowing them that space to struggle a little bit and don't jump in, I find that to be one of the little holy grails of sorts that I find to be. There's too much structure. They don't know how to self-organize. And when I was coaching college, I got to see it a ton where like they finally get this freedom and it's just and a lot of them make terrible decisions, make them
Yeah.
in a very better spot, you know, I should say earlier.
Well, and especially with hockey where it's, you're not running set plays. It's inherently got that element of chaos in it. And I think it's good training for life to learn how to deal with that. So,
Making good taxpayers.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Exactly. Well, that's about all the questions I've got for you, at least today. I mean, obviously we talk forever, but
Yeah.
um, thanks for doing the interview and being a
Yeah.
guest on this podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So
A
yeah,
lot of good questions. I mean, you got me rambling, which usually I'm direct and to the point, but when you get me rambling, clearly you've struck some good chords with me. So, no, thanks for the excellent conversation and questions. It was fantastic.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, I'm just going to throw one back your way. You know, what's something that you've taken away from being a part of the Hockey IQ universe? Is there something from a newsletter, a podcast, or a few things that you've taken away and implemented on your own?
Well, the sort of like the list that you mentioned earlier, the Martin Saint Louis, or I don't know how I'm supposed to say that. Actually, now I'm getting a
Yeah.
immense surge of self doubt about the pronunciation. But anyways, and the Jill Plandowski ones in particular were both making me think about things that I probably ought to be doing. And in the case of Saint Louis, it was the idea of I talk a lot about moving the puck, you know, high low or east west to create space through confusion, but emphasizing the playing between coverages. One of the things that I like about podcasts is that they're good things to sort of listen to and absorb through osmosis, but then you'll come along, some particular little tip or idea that just sparks something, a neuron in your brain. And, I'll put it in a little Google Keep note and then really try, in the coming practices to like implement it. And so there sometimes it's just terminology. It's like I think I'm communicating a certain idea until I hear someone else use a far better way of describing it. And then,
Yeah,
and
been there,
that
done that.
yeah, and that in and of itself is enough. And then there are other times where um, I will listen to someone say something that I'm just like, what are they talking about? But by going through you know, the motions of trying to figure out like what could that possibly mean, and it'll spark its own idea. With the I also often am reminded of the limitations of my own situation where Jill was talking about introducing pucks into skating lessons as much as possible. And I run our power skating course. And so I'm like, well, I should be doing that. And, there are limitations I have based on like who else is on the ice with us at the same time, because we don't have the full ice. And there are just different things like that. The other big thing is I'm forgetting the name of the guy, but he goes around and he writes about like Frölunda and Shattuck and just like premier programs and sort of what they do that makes them great. And he talked a lot about the sort of the aspect of vision that they have, that the rink is not just a business and people aren't just there to like coach their own kids. And if some other kids are on the ice, that's fine too. There's a mission statement or a sense of purpose and philosophy that goes from the top all the way down. And there isn't this same feeling of hierarchy that you might get at other ranks. And, those things are both aspirational and sometimes a little depressing, because it's like, I really want to do that in my own situation.
Yep.
But
we all have our own constraints.
Yeah, it's really hard to do just like as one person.
Yeah. Matt Duchel, Dumichel, something like
Yes,
that. Talent factories.
There's you've done a lot of podcasts. So it's those are just ones that that stuck with me and I remembered. And there are plenty of others as well.
Yeah, you always got to remember that point shot suck. Just want to remind you that to everyone.
Yeah. So it's the big value that podcasts have to me, because it's sort of ironic, right? Like we're talking about a sport, and we're not just talking about like, oh, this player is great and that player is great. It's like very specific knowledge about how to train players in the sport, how to understand, the development process, things like that. And those things can be a little abstract, and when you're speaking in an audio medium, it can be difficult, but it's really good for just sort of getting your mind in that brain space where that's just what you're thinking about for a good solid, half hour to an hour or whatever, and just pulling a lot of ideas from people that you would otherwise probably never hear from. So, I very much appreciate that service that you provide, and good job. So
thank you. Appreciate it. This was a wonderful conversation. Again, thank you, Eric, so much for coming on. This was fun.
Sure thing.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.